So to get a little more in on that this afternoon, we've reduced the cost of this report from about 2 hours down to 45 minutes. So we're going to roll pretty hard. As you can see, Mitch is passing out the report. So I'm going to hit some kind of high points. There's a lot of detail in here. Some of it's repeated because it's the same process for each stage of production. But we will we'll go through that. So from an introduction standpoint, I think most of you have heard me here. You know, I'm LattaHarris. I actually live over. My address is rural Iowa City, so I'm not very far from here, about an hour. Been involved with LattaHarris for about 20 years now. Prior to that, I was a pig farmer, and I was active in National Pork Producers, did a bunch of work with them. And I got an MBA back in there about some decades ago now. But been doing a lot of work with FBS. Actually been working with FBS in one form or the other since about '83, so quite a while. So pretty comfortable with that. When I came with LattaHarris, we started to recognize the need to do benchmarking. So it took a couple of years of me being there, but now it's the 16th year. We have rolled up this data for our clients and a few others that are included in the report. Mitch Richmond here, who has helped me put together a lot of this data, is an accountant in our office in Tipton, and he lives nearby too. And he is passing out two things: a copy of the report, everybody's welcome to those, and if you have data within the report, he's giving you a card with your numbers on it, because it's everybody's identity protected, so you better get your code number to see who's with it. So I'm just going to roll on here. So LattaHarris, we got about 80 employees. We're located in southeast Iowa. We're in a lot of the county seats, but we also have kind of a regional presence. We have clients from Ohio to Kansas, Minnesota to Missouri for the most part. It's kind of the area we work in. My area, the work area I work in, is primarily on the managerial accounting side, but we do classic, a lot of heavy in the tax area. About 50% of everything the firm does is ag related, so we have a lot of involvement in agriculture. What are you looking at? Same thing I talked about yesterday with the crop records. This is an individual number. It's not a competition. I was talking earlier today that it is some estimation, and when you go to managerial accounting, you get involved with estimation. So there's a little bit of that. There's some of that going on. Some allocations going on between production enterprises, and that's that 90% is better than 100% of nothing, which sometimes people get hung up trying to get to perfection. It requires accrual financial information with accrual income statements, and we need, in this particular case, and it depends. We have some data sets in here that are only whole herd because we can't break out the salvia cost from the weed to finish cost. If we have a data set with enterprising sufficient, then we try to track sow herd performance and wean to finish performance, and then whole herd, combining those two. We have participants in this data set this year from 6 states. The process is during this last summer, and actually right now I have defined the 2019 benchmarks, which are, 2019 benchmarks. We're looking at 2018 data in this report. What I go out on a limb mid-year and I project what I think it's going to be for 19. And we'll address that a little bit more. Because many of these data sets we have access to, I'm able to review them and to gather some information and by consultation with our clients, find out questions, and we know a lot about the firms that are included in here. So I have, a year ago, I defined a 2018 benchmark. I started updating that in the early part of 19. And then in this process, as we see actual data coming in, we go in and refine even further. You'll see coming up here, I think there's a fair number of new faces in this group. I have something in here called the 50th percentile and 90th percentile benchmark. And my definition of that is 50th percentile is you're an average producer and you can't sustainably stay average. It's amazing how long people can stay average. But if you're not doing better than 50th on your numbers, you probably need to fix what you got, or you need to, in some cases, leave the industry. Don't see much of that anymore, and frankly, the 50th, those that are below the 50th now, you have some reason they're still in business. Yet a lot of times it has to do, they have a revenue stream that's pretty good, that they're able to tap, and that's some of the reason their costs are higher too, because they're trying to meet a specialty revenue stream of some sort. And the 90th percentile is you're in the top 90%. At least you're in the top 90% of the data we're aware of. And over the years, we have interactively worked with Farm Credit and Joe Connor and the Carthage guys. We have checked our data and our analysis to see if this is consistent with what they're seeing in the industry at large. So here, and again, we provide these printouts because the data is so small, but this is what I have defined as the 2018, and I don't know why it cuts off, but it does stop, benchmarks for 2018. And you see here we constructed really 3 columns. We have a breed to wean, a wean to finish, and then a whole herd. So the breed to wean is the cost to produce a wean pig. And there we've got trying to set up a range here, the 50th percentile and the 90th percentile. And the wean to finish is the cost to add a pound of gain, 100 pounds of gain. So that is whether you have nursery and finishing barns or a true wean to finish facility, that's all included in that section. And then whole herd, which is a combination of breed to wean and wean to finish to get you a whole herd number. We do that by intention, is utilizing benchmarks. I talked about how we tried to do that over the crop side yesterday on the livestock side. If you only have whole herd and you have an issue, you're 60th percentile, 55th percentile, you want to get better, where do you get better? So if you don't understand what's going on within that business, what do you fix? So by breaking the breed to wean out, which is almost completely standard now, for the most part, but when we started 16 years ago, that wasn't standard. So that's something we have done. And by defining a benchmark under each one of these sections, we start to, the idea here is to try to give our clients an idea of where their things are working well and where they need to improve. And by the breakouts, the categories, feed cost, genetics, vet med, and a kind of a category we sub up here, which we say cost normally borne by contractor, meaning we're trying to get to numbers that reflects the reality of the world in which you operate. You can sell wean pigs. There's a market for it. So you can price and sell wean pigs. So knowing what the market is versus your cost gives you some idea how you perform. You can also be a contractor, and you can produce, you can own facilities and provide the labor and farrow somebody else's sows, and they'll pay you $1 per pig weaned. I'm telling you to do that, anything new. But again, that's a benchmarkable number against a market. And that's what we try to accomplish here. Cost to add 100 pounds of gain. And this is based on the data sets we looked at. The average market weight's 284, about 13 pounds in the breed to wean, so about 2.71 hundredweights of gain. So again, we're trying to break that out. We're trying to look at feed costs. So as we do the benchmarks, if we see that you're, well, even if you're in the 90th percentile and you want to get even better, where do you focus on getting better? So that's why it's pretty crucial to us to make sure we categorize stuff. And so I spend quite a bit of time when I look at these data sets trying to get stuff into the right categories and be sure, especially if it's a new data set and we haven't had it in the past. You know, you can always pretty well figure out what your cost is you look at your total cost and divide it by the pigs produced. That's what your cost per head is. But to get to the categories, you've got to make some effort in your general ledger to get there. There it works. So I put this slide's in there in several places, but this is the farrow to finish. This is the whole herd. 16-year history that we've been doing this. You can see, and the red line is the 50th benchmark that we've established. The green line is the 90th percentile, and the orange line is what we have seen in the actual observation of the average of the observations. So to say that this encompasses the entire nation, it doesn't. It's based on the sample set of data that we get. We feel fairly comfortable that that sample set is fairly representative of the industry at large. For the most part, every time we've really looked hard at that, it seems to be and I'm talking commercial production. So you can see in the early years, we weren't that great predicting the benchmarks. But over this time, we learned more and more. You can see we're starting to get this thing pretty well nailed down to represent, benchmarks at least represent what we expect to see, and this is primarily Corn Belt performance. Let's talk a little bit about how the benchmark. So this is a 90th percentile example from this year's 18 data. The average cost, the 90th percentile for producing a wean pig was $29.74. So when you wean a pig and you take it in the wean to finish barns, they're not all going to get to market. You're going to have a death loss. And in this example, and kind of what we see, about a 4% death loss. So 39.74 divided by 0.96 says that you've got to carry $30.98 wean pig cost to when you sell it as a market hog. So that's where that number comes from. And then we have the market weight 284 or 13 pounds, 271 pounds of gain. So if we're saying the 90th percentile is 35.17 times 2.71, you're putting on top of the cost of the wean pig, you're putting a number $95.31 to get that pig to market. So you take 30.98 but 95.31, you get 126, and then if you figure out you're actually selling 284 hundredweights, you divide the 126.29 by 284, and that symbol there is a symbol that means approximately the mean. Title, I think they call it. I'm not exactly sure. You'll see it a lot in my analysis, but around 46, and you can actually get this math to work exactly, but you might have to have 5 or 6 decimals to get it, so you get some rounding going on. That's why it's not exact. So that's how the pieces come together. And then frankly, at the end of the day, when I work out stuff, I run this on the data sets. I run this on the, and it's got, the math's got to work out. It just has to work out. So that's a check on the calculation. So big picture observations, 18 to 17. So the wheat is, the costs are going up. The average performance went up 256 to 4006. The the 90th percentile went up $1.51. The wean finish costs are creeping down a little bit. 162 on the 50th and 106. And the whole herd is down 76.51. Not, frankly, when I was going through the data looking at 18 versus 17, not, some years we see a lot of change. It was not any huge changes year to year for the most part. So this is a little description, and there's one of these for each one of the categories for the cost. But in this case, the divisor is pig produced, a complete equivalent. So if there was a growth in the sow herd or a decline in the sow herd, you take unborn, unweaned pigs at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, and you get an adjustment number, and you adjust to actual pigs weaned, trying to adjust for the change of. This works pretty well, except when you're in really heavy growth or contraction. If you've got a lot of growth and it's not even throughout the year, you can get a little more less trustworthy numbers. But if the sow herds are staying fairly steady, it works really pretty well. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, trying to stay on schedule here. We actually had a couple, and I think some of this has to do with the year we've been in. We had a couple of data sets that were of the larger end that we didn't get their data in this year. So some small decline in our number of animals. Last year we were about 1.5 million pigs. But there's 43,700 sows represented in this. And those herds, just taking the average sow herd divided by the pigs weaned. This is not a pig champ number or somebody else's. This is what they weaned divided by their average sow herd was 23.7. Which is often, my experience has been, a lower number than what's reported out of the sow databases. So what I'm trying to do is get to the real, what actually happened. My average cost was $36.04. We had 19 farms in the data set. Still almost a $20 range in costs. We're talking yesterday about, on the crop side, how much range we see. On the livestock side, on the hog side, we still see lots of variation. The ranges are way bigger than you would think they'd be in a relatively mature industry we're in. Labor and facilities, 8 to 19. Now sometimes, and this is just looking at the numbers, but sometimes there's justification. They've had a serious health issue or something going on, so their divisor has gotten quite a bit smaller. Genetics, quite a wild range. And this is something we've also noticed over the 16 years. So of the 9 herds with costs lower than the average, so these are the plus 90th percentile side, above the average, 7 were smaller than 3,000 sows and 2 were larger than 3,000 sows. When I say larger, they could be 20,000 sows, but the split is between, we try to protect identity, so we don't say exactly how many sows are being represented by anybody. So the takeaway from this is we've seen over the years, back and forth, the larger herds do better than the smaller herds, and then the next year the smaller herds do better than the larger herd, almost to the point where I'm relatively indifferent to the size of the herd. as far as its cost performance. Now, there may be lots of other reasons with the size of the herd, but from a cost standpoint, we're just not seeing that being large is a guarantee of a lower cost. Here's a sheet that, again, I got to speed up a little bit to get through this, but here's a sheet looking at more detail at the individual numbers between the smaller size herds and the larger size herds. Comparison to the benchmarks. And there's 118 and 17. So in 17, the smaller herds were $1.54 lower, and in 18 they were 94 cents lower. Now some years we've looked at this, and the larger herds had a lower cost. Not sure what it tells us, but we've been tracking it. We also have found, and I've been shocked. I brought in a couple new clients in the last year, new operations, that you can still go out and buy old facilities, at least around 1,000 sows units, and still make pretty damn good money, farrowing, even if, it's small, depending on what you're doing. So, at one point, I think, because I was so involved in the industry, being an NPPC and so forth, we thought at some point there would be no place in the industry for the smaller end of the industry. And I still see people making a lot of wealth from being smaller. And I see large operations making a lot of wealth and getting larger too. So it's all happening.
John, the number that stands out to me is the difference in feed costs between the smaller producers and larger producers. Does that have to do with the smaller producers maybe raising more of their own feed and using a transfer price that may not be accurate?
Yes, and we try to correct for that, but it can always be, if you're raising 100% of your feed, and so your transfer cost, and everybody does their transfer cost on home raised feed slightly different. You'll see when we get into the growth, into the wean to finish, it reverses to somewhat, but on the sows, I think that is very possible. And I mentioned that yesterday. We dealt with some units that their primary function is raising pigs, even though they have some crop ground, and we really can't separate out the cost to raise that corn. We just include the input cost, the land rent, and whatever else might be in there, and call it part of their feed costs.
And then for those larger sow farms that might have their own feed mill, are you capturing all the costs of the milling?
We try really hard to do that. We also go in and try to say, let's say you've got machinery depreciation, which is feed trucks, and you've got labor, which is feed mill labor. And if we don't know, and what we prefer to do, which we haven't been shown these data sets, but we do a fair bit of calculation of what's it cost per ton to produce a ton of feed, if we can get to the data. And so we do try to do that, and then we try to adjust the data set. If those costs are buried someplace else, we bring that labor, that's feed mill labor, into feed costs. So we try to get as equal as we can. So here's the report. Every individual farm has a farm code on the left. Their size category is here, the average is here. And while this is not probably statistically correct, I do half a standard deviation because I've always because our data set is relatively small for the variation we see, I really think that in this range between these two yellow bars, there's not a significant difference. But I do feel pretty strongly that in the range of the 90th and below the 50th, those are significantly different. Now, one thing about because of the nature that we work with a lot of these firms, we do their taxes, we help them do their transitions and the financials. You know, we can always kind of check to see, you know, what are these guys doing? And this is the same whether it's we to finish or holder. If they're up here on the 90th and they stay up here on the 90th, they buy farms. They're growing, their operations are growing. If they're down here, they're not. So we actually try to, from just a knowledge standpoint, look to see if we're seeing consistency. Now, this is an annual report, so there may be people that are down here that just happens because it's a bad year. And that does happen. And you'll see in a minute, we also try to do, we have been, because of using some pivot tables and all the 16 years worth of data now, we're trying to look at some longer term periods and see what we see. But this is that report. We also try to do on the breed weans, on the sow herds, we look at it on a per sow basis, because that's indifferent to the number of wean. It's just what's your cost per sow. And if you look at the categories, sometimes people stay pretty much in order, but if you look at the sow range, it can be a little bit different. And I said earlier that it looked like 18 and 17 were pretty close. Well, here's the beige colored line is 17's average. The blue is 18's average, almost identical. From an average basis, you can see a large. So this is kind of a year-over-year change. I can't see the bottom number there, but so from a less than 3,000 sow standpoint, the costs were 101% of the prior year, and the larger units were 95% of the prior year. So this is we're moving into the breed to weans. Okay, here's the breed of weeds over 9 years. And so the average is average of the 9 years. The green is the benchmark average for the 9 years, not the particular data set. So these are operations that we have 9 years worth of data. So how do we use this? You know, it might not be all that meaningful right here to say, okay, I'm wherever I'm at on that. If you're a 3490, you number D. But we have gone in and the client asked us, all right, is this a good enterprise for us? Or should we move out of breed to weans and just buy our pigs? Or should we make some change? And because we have all this historic data, we're able to go in and grab it and look at it, we can kind of get a sense of how well they're performing. So often we have conversations about how competitive are you. So we've had small, developing, smaller operations that have done extremely well on their costs and are performing well. And when we consult with them, we say, well, from a competitive standpoint, you're nailing it. Or they say, and we have come in here and looked at the breed of weans and said, listen, you're not producing your wean pig at a low enough cost. You better think about, your wean to finish looks good, but your breed to wean is bad, and you're living too close to the highway and you break with purse too often. And usually they got a pretty good sense of that, but we use this historic data to put some numbers around advice to them. And in some of those cases, they bought into sow herds in other locations. And they're not trying to produce their own pigs anymore because of their location. We do have, and I just threw this in as another example, we do have one of the data sets that's only in this section, which is the contractor costs, who tracks really hard what his cost is, and he's just a contractor. He gets paid per pig wean, and his costs are the contractor costs. So we then say to him, because his margin is the difference between his contract and what his costs are. Now the other thing you could look at this and you could say, you could, at one point, and I'm not sure what the current number is, but at one point you could hire this done for about $16 a pig. And there's people down here at $17 and $18 a pig, and you go, why are you raising pigs if you can buy them for $16? If you can pay somebody else $16 to do it for you, why are you raising them? So those are the kind of tough conversations that this, now, like I talked about on the crop side, sometimes you got to understand the entire story, and there may be a reason they're doing that. But here's a 9-year average. So, you know, everybody's been at 9 years is doing it less than $16. And that's where we talk about, you know, the benchmarks being if you're below the average benchmarks, you know, nobody in this group anyway is above that, because it'd be pretty hard to stay in business over that many years if you're that far out of costing. This is, for those of you that are new in the room, this is something we found in this data working on. So the way we do a lot of the costs is we take so the idea is to get down to one divisor. And one divisor implies one revenue. So how many dollars worth of weaned pigs did you sell? How many head of weaned pigs did you sell? So what do you do with sow sales in that case? We treat sow sales as a cost reducer to genetics costs. And when we started to think about that way, it became obvious to us that some people dispose of their cull sows. They don't market their cull sows. So when we looked at this, and we still look at it, is, you know, the average pound of culls, and that can be that's kind of like that custom hire thing on the crop side. It's what you get for some of the residual revenue streams that are pretty impactful. This is the range, 396 to 536. The lighter ones tend to be, they're selling them pretty close to coming out of the farrowing. The heavier ones is, we have a place for them, we move them to, we put some weight on them, we get them dried up. You know, the average value, 30 is $10 difference. And this is all Midwestern. I don't think the sows are ending up in really different markets someplace. You know, most of it goes into sausage, and you know, and there's still that much difference. And sometimes, and the reality is, when I look at the data, sometimes it's the same people year after year that are on the lower end because they're not marketing. And I have worked with people, and they've come to understand that, and they have improved their cost because they improved their marketing. A value per head, 135 to 215, $80. Okay, so I've come in, and I'm sure it's true any place in the country. $80, and I try to come up with a kind of an opportunity. So, what's the opportunity on 1,000 sows? $80 a head and 1,000 sows, $80,000 to the bottom line. And you guys are all in the pig, a lot of you in the pig industry, sometimes $80,000 may be all you see. And, you know, frankly, sometimes that can be in things, in the little things that people don't think about. So we to finish, 161 million pounds, 604,000 pigs in the comparative 12 farms. Again, a pretty good range. Spread, $8.80, about $24 a pig. 2000, but a better cost than it was in 19, so it was 27 and went down to 24 in the spread, but still a big spread, and we see these spreads every year. Labor facilities, a big spread there. Feed, still a relatively big spread in feed, average about $26 per 100 pound of gain. So kind of a mix in the number of, in the scale, but getting here to, and then here we just did a cutoff on 100,000 hundredweights. Again, kind of the idea of the 3,000. So nothing, don't read too much into it. That's just kind of how we look at the data and spread it out. And we're comparing the category of cost and adding the cost of 100 pound gain. So not a huge difference, but here you see the feed costs on the smaller units slightly higher than on the larger units. At one point in the past, we saw quite a bit of difference between who had their own feed mills versus toll milling, and we still see that. A well-run feed mill is, we think, especially at any scale, is pretty critical. That's probably not surprising. To get more control over your costs.
Oh, 10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes left? Yep. Okay. So here's the 17th, the 18th. So I'm going to jump through these fairly quick and we can finish. Again, the same idea within that. Beige between the two bars, you know, those numbers maybe are not significantly different. We do still constantly see these that are performing above and beyond, above and below. This is just a chart on costs by year, just to kind of show you year over year the changes. This was the benchmark kind of comparison to actuals, where we're coming out. This is a 5-year average. Again, trying to get this context. And we were talking about some data handling. This is all done through pivot tables. And I just transferred the data into it. So whole herd, average cost $49.65, 10 farms. A spread of about $32 per pig, $11.48 a hundredweight sold. It was 29. It's actually gone up a little bit. That's being driven by that increase in breed-to-meat costs. You know, the difference between in that spread is about $115,000 on 10,000 pounds. Real money. Feed range, and I keep trying to understand, and what I often see on feed, and when we analyze that, is, I mentioned that yesterday, but it's usually not because people are feeding bad feed, they're usually overfeeding. They're usually not getting the performance for the extra cost of it. And the other thing that happens a lot of times when people go to their own feed mills is they do a better job of pricing the lower inclusion stuff. They get a better price on buying their own directly versus taking what the feed mill prices. We stood here at 14 million live pounds between the two categories. the variance on the unit size. It's cut off on my sheet. 381 to 491, so the variance was actually up a little bit, the difference between the size of the herds. And again, it's so much of what I see anymore is, paying attention to detail. And some of the small operations pay really good attention to detail. Some of the larger operations do a great job, and some of them struggle because they have a lot of units to manage. So it really, at the end of the day, it's what we see is in success is often management. And that again should not be surprising. There is the data set. That's again the bar charts on the comparison year to year. That's our benchmark looking out, as you saw earlier. And here's a 9-year average. And we can see these differences in the performance of these herds over there. So what do we see on the market sales side? Is that rates are going up a little bit in this set of farms. The average value per hundredweight is down, and this was 18. I'm sure what the 19 numbers are going to look like. Average value per head 142 down $6 from 148. We look at off values because I'm trying to take that same approach we do on cull sows to how off value hogs are marketed. The backup's good though.
Persistent.
And you were listening this morning.
Mm-hmm. No, you didn't. Well, he said that wasn't necessarily a good idea, right?
He's a slayer.
Yeah.
Um, Average value actually was up on the off value. Percent of off value was down 0.4% year over year in this data set. I've seen people getting better and better in this area. Off value being anything that doesn't go to standard market. Usually, I think they're tail enders coming off of groups. How do you bat it? Too much stuff. I can't stand it. It's just not happy to make me walk around. So I do the observation of market sales so I can look at the next page, which is observation of profit margins. And I do this, I kind of make some big global assumptions here, but I show you kind of the 17 and the 16 performance here, so you can see the changes. You see the ranges that even within the data set in 18, pretty big range. 274 to 293 in market rates. You take the 50th percentile cost, it'd be about 147 per head versus 126 per head for the top 10%.
John, the revenue includes hedging profits and losses.
Yes. And we try, when we look at hedging gain and losses, to separate what was based on feed and what was based on market animals. Spread potential at a potential average revenue and a 90 percentile cost. A 6-year average is $23. So over 6 years, being in the top 10%, about $23 more profit per pig. Take that times just a 10,000 head number, $231,000 per year, times 6. It's a lot of money. That's why we see the people that are really have figured this out and doing really well, growing and acquiring more assets and building more assets and creating more wealth, and those that are on the 50th percentile, if they're lucky, they're holding it together. So here are just wrapping up, looking at the benchmarks for this year. That X is what I project for 19. See, last year we projected pretty well. Back in the 13 and 12, we didn't do very well at all. And this is the 19. This is for this year, for 12 months of this year. And so this is what we're projecting the numbers will be. And we do some adjustments on both the 18 and the 19, where we look at if your year end is different. And that's basically, in this case, we're looking at a September 30th year end and a March 31st year end of 20, down here on the bottom. And that's really, we got a lot more confidence in the September 30th because we've got 9 months, almost 9 months worth of, more than that, 11 months worth of corn data to drive that. So that's probably a pretty tight number. When you're getting out there, you're getting into more speculation about what corn prices are. And that's estimating corn at the farm, at the feed mill, at $3.52 a bushel, slightly higher cost than was in 17. Bean mill at $3.31 a ton, up $28 a ton from the 17 cost. And that, I always step out on a limb, but I just look at the numbers, and that's what the numbers tell me. And so I'm going to wrap up here. That's where our offices are located. And thank you for the chance to review this with you. Question?
If you look back at the same farms, what changes occurred?
Well, it depends on where they're at in the percentiles, okay? So the ones that are pushing the higher end have grown. The ones that are on the lower end, closer to the 50th side, some have adapted. They have shut down sow units and bought pigs. They have made changes. Some of them are no longer in business. In the 16 years we've done this. So quite a variety, but you do see it's not static, things change. The ones that have,
Costs come down
well, it depends.
as a group?
As a group, well, no, because there's so much of costs. They don't have, the only really thing they have control of is their production efficiency. And costs will be what the market does to them, what feed costs are, what labor. So labor's been creeping up. But the big thing that's been going on, again, no surprise to anybody, is we've kept costs relatively stable, even though costs have been going up because we're producing more all the time. Same thing on the crop side, pushing out more bushels. Look at the, it's not uncommon now for us to see breeding weed pigs at 29, 30 pigs. That, at 16 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to see 19. So now we're seeing 10 more. So you think about what you're doing to your divisor. So that has been the driver in many cases, is just getting better at what they do. And if you haven't been able to get better, it's been hard to stay in the business. Any other questions?
How are you handling pig vaccines, South Farm or or finishing farm.
It's still one of the numbers that's really kind of funky in the database
Yeah.
because they get handled both places. Some people vaccinate everything before they wean the pigs, and some people vaccinate when they go into the barns. So I
Try to
haven't,
flag them or anything.
yeah, I haven't been able to get that deep. Because we do a lot, we don't charge for, if we have good data, putting the data in, we don't charge for that. So it's hard to spend an awful lot of hours getting that deep into it. What I'm seeing, well, in many cases, it feels to me like it's, a lot of times it's on the breeding side, on the salaries. But that cost is one that seems to fluctuate a little bit, where that, from a category standpoint. Yes?
Of the 19 farms, are they all commercial, or do you have any multiplier herds, or don't you notice the difference?
We don't really have any multiplier herds in that. Now, we have had herds over the years that produce some gilts for other folks, and that can be a challenge. So one of the challenges you get into is, say you're in a sow herd and you're producing pigs, and you know that's okay. But then when it gets to the wean to finish, you've got, and I think we talked about this earlier. I have Howard is back here where they were selling off 80-pound gilts and then 100-pound gilts and 220-pound gilts and full weight gilts, and then the rest were going to. That gets really tricky because you've got all those different divisors. So without something like Eclipse, and without really, and even with that, it's still tricky to track all that. So from a multiplier herd standpoint, some of these units, if they have a multiplier herd and it's just part of their overall sow herd, it's just included in the sow herd data. But we don't track multiplier herds by themselves.
I want to go back to the feed costs on the wean to finish. Pretty good range from top to bottom of feed costs. Any sense how much of that is cost per unit of feed efficiency, rate of gain?
Yes, all of those. I mean,
But you don't have a sense of
I don't.
biggest driver
No,
is.
I don't. Yeah, it's. I can't tell you for sure, but those are all parts of it. Yeah,
Do you all track in any way what the consumption per sow is in these units?
I often have the data, and I haven't put it into the report, but I probably should do that, and I should probably try harder to answer your question, to show what. But one of the really big issues in the wean to finish is what's that ending inventory. We have a dollar change that in some cases somebody has calculated, accountants have calculated, but the way that people value inventory varies. And you can use a standard like an Iowa State chart where you're coming up with, we think this is their weight, we think this is their value, or you could use Eclipse, and you can say this is our actual cost in them. So that's still, if we were all doing full whip, it would be more meaningful, but we're not. So that inventory, the change in that inventory is still difficult. So you get my hands completely around. And probably could account for some of the variation. Anything else? Thank you. Appreciate it.